starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webcast, Autodesk Revit for Interior Designers. Our presenter today is Robert Levy. He's a solutions engineer with Hagerman and Company. We are also joined by Daniel Rosenberg, who is on the line to help field questions as we go. Daniel is also a solutions engineer with Hagerman and Company. Before we get started, I want to let you know that you're in listening only mode. If you have questions during the presentation, just type them into the question panel on the right-hand side of your screen, and they'll be addressed throughout by Dan and at the end by Robert. As you exit the webcast today, you'll be prompted to fill out a survey, and we do ask that you take a few moments to fill that out. This webcast does qualify for one AIA continuing education credit. If you'd like to receive this credit, just type your AIA number and question 3 of the survey after the webcast. And with that, I'll hand things over to Robert.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Robert. I'm an AEC Solutions Engineer with Hagerman. What I do is I help companies transition to BIM and some other Autodesk technologies and softwares. So my expertise is more related to the BIM aspect of the field. So I've worked with anything from architects to interior designers to contractors to subcontractors, helping them implement BIM and some of the other technologies that are available. So today we're going to talk about how does BIM and Revit fit into the interior design space. I've been hearing a lot of I would say rumors about what's really going on and why Revit is sometimes not adopted in firms, and I want to talk about several aspects of how we can achieve this in a typical interior design firm. And so my topics are going to be some of the reasons why BIM can be effective for interior designers rather than traditional 2D CAD. I'm going to also talk about the current trends in BIM technology for interior designers. What's going on in the industry? What's the latest and greatest? What are people using? I'm going to talk about how interior designers can effectively use BIM for presentations, construction documents, and some rendering capabilities, scheduling, cost estimating, specifications capabilities as they relate to interior designers. And I'm going to talk about some of the ways you can implement BIM to minimize risk or implement Revit. So I'm going to take a high-level approach. I'll go into some of the more detailed aspects of this. So if you have any questions that are more specific, please go ahead and use our chat window. I usually try to answer them at the end, and usually, when people have questions, I usually tend to cover them later on, but definitely write them down or put them in the chat box, and we will try to answer them either towards the presentation or towards the end. Thank you so much, guys. So the first thing I want to talk about is why is BIM such an effective approach as opposed to traditional 2D CAD. So BIM has already been around for quite a while, and I think what happens is there are firms that have implemented it and are doing well with it, and there are firms that have tried it and might have jumped out, and there's everything in between. So it really depends on where your firm is at, how much you're taking advantage of the technology. In specific, when we talk about BIM and using it for the interior design space, I think that companies really need to think about leveraging the information in the model. I think that's the most important thing that a company can leverage that will cost them the least money, the least investment to actually get out of the tools. So when we talk about BIM, BIM is not just working with a 3D model. If I were just simply working with a 3D model, then I really wouldn't have to use a particular BIM tool. I could use maybe 3ds Max or some other just general 3D modeling tool. So where we're really going with this, and where most of the firms that are effective, is they are taking the information from that model and they're using that information in an effective way. So the I in BIM, we can never forget the I in BIM, which is the information portion. First of all, let's talk in regards to about Revit. When I talk about BIM, I really am usually referring to Revit because Revit's, in my opinion, Revit really gets to the heart of where BIM is. And personally, it's my favorite tool, but other people have their own personal favorites. And since we are an Autodesk reseller, I think I'm in the right place by having Revit as my favorite BIM tool. So first of all, Revit's a database, and a lot of these BIM tools, they kind of function like databases. And when we have a database, we have essentially a bunch of records of information, and we have a way of pulling up those records of information. So essentially, Revit can be used as a database, which this is very, very effective. And a lot of people just don't realize this, or they don't really take the full potential because they don't really realize what it can do for you. So one of the things that you can do is you can use this information for project management. An example would be if I had a project and I had to search for specific finish types, and if I had to, for example, know whether I was not supposed to use a finish or whether I needed to use a finish in a certain room, you can look this information up inside of your Revit model. So essentially, you're using it as a project management tool for quality control. And this allows you to very, very quickly perform a quality control in a Revit model, where as opposed to some of the other tools, you would not be able to do this. If you had a 2D, two-dimensional drawing, this would just not be possible or very practical. So while you could still accomplish this in some other ways, it might require a lot of either programming setup or just a lot of workflow changes in order to be able to do something like this. Whereas with Revit and some of these other BIM packages that work together with Revit, you can use it as a project management tool. Sorry for the background noise. I'm actually in the downtown office, so there's a lot of noise in the background. So what I could do is if I know what I'm looking for, I could search for this data in the Revit model. And if I have something modeled here, for example, I have a sample project that I did. And for example, if I know that I'm looking for a certain furniture piece, I can create a schedule, and I could filter out that schedule based on what kind of furniture it is or what manufacturer. I could list anything that's inside of this building information model. There are other tools that might be able to model, but you just cannot do this if you're just doing a 2D workflow. So it's very highly effective, and a lot of times I think it's underutilized because BIM is sort of a newer way of doing it, and I say newer, it's not really new anymore. It's a newer way, so a lot of project managers don't have that much experience with BIM that I've noticed, and some of them do, and they're highly effective. But a lot of project managers are just kind of new to the whole BIM world and how do we manage these BIM projects. So another thing that you can do with this information is you can streamline it for specifications writing. A lot of times we have to do specifications of furniture, fixture, equipment, and these BIM tools, or Revit I would say, allows you to pull up this information very quickly and be able to organize the information so that you can create specs for all of your projects, and you can specify furniture and other things that are appropriate, so you can have your construction documents ready faster. And really the only requirement of this is really to put the information in. That's really the only requirement. There are several ways to do this. You could do this by simply inputting the information into, say, a Revit family. You can also you can put a link to all of the information. So you can link your Revit model to another database, and you can pull information from that database. And this is how some of these Revit add-ins function, where they do specifications, is they interface, they talk to a database, and then you're basically filling up the information into that database, and you can pull it up from using the model or using the database. Another really powerful aspect is information can be used for analysis. For example, in a lot of these lead daylighting analysis. Now, I have to say this a bit carefully, because there's a lot of confusion on exactly how a Revit model relates to lead. A Revit model doesn't automatically give you, a lead specifications book or anything like this. What a Revit model does is it makes it easier for you to get the information out of the model. It makes it easier for you to filter through the information in the model so that you can get the exact information you need so that you get your lead specifications or your lead certification. So you still have to set up the software to be able to pull out that information. But Revit actually makes it quite easy to do, and it's very powerful depending on how your process has been set up. So it does require a process. You need to train your firm. Your firm needs to be up to speed and know how to put in that information in order to later get it out. Okay. So the fourth thing, the major thing that I think is also, it can be used for cost estimation in real time. And when I say in real time, I'm talking about all of these things I've been talking about, where you can use the information. All of this is in real time. And what I mean by this is, if I remove a piece of furniture, or if I delete a wall, or I add something in, the information is constantly being updated in real time. So you don't have to go back and modify some other thing there, or you really, your model is the thing that provides all this information, and it's accurate as far, depending on how you use it or what tools you're using with it. It's usually accurate in real time, unless you have some process in place for some reason. So again, cost estimation. If you put in the cost information, you can later fish out that information from the model. And maybe you might not think this is a big deal, but I've had projects where I've worked with some team members, and early on I was told to come up with a design and lay it out and everything else, and I did a little bit of cost analysis early on, and I found out early on that the project had too low of a budget. I mean, because I already had all the square footages there, I already knew how many finishes there were. You can already get this data without doing much modeling, okay? So you really have to look at where your firm is at in the BIM implementation. Some firms are still kind of new to it, other firms are about middle ground, and some firms are pretty advanced. And there's sort of help for everybody depending on where you're at. There's a different solution. So what are some of the current trends in BIM technology, for interior designers? So these trends that I'm saying, I mean, they're not just for interior designers. There's for architects, engineers, construction professionals, but they do relate to the interior design professions in many ways. For example, cloud rendering. We like to do a lot of rendering for our interiors. I think a lot of times we want to do more rendering than the client probably wants to pay for. But the reality is that if you can get a rendering done quickly, cheaply, and easily, you can probably provide your client with some freebies and some idea of where the project is going, rather than just a 2D floor plan or some 2D drawing, which I'd hate to say it, but there are a lot of very educated clients out there, but there are also a lot of clients that will go through, they'll read our drawings and will pretend and nod to you and say, yes, I understand, and then when the project goes up, they look at you and they're like, I didn't think it was going to look like this. So rendering is very effective, and sometimes the client doesn't even know what they don't know. So they don't even know that the project may not look the way they wanted. And so if you can provide some kind of rendering, even if it's very basic and simple, extremely effective. So Now we have cloud rendering. So cloud rendering is a technology where you're sending your Revit model or your AutoCAD model or your Inventor model. You can send this model up to the cloud, which is basically a bunch of server machines that have very powerful processors. And these server machines will crunch and calculate and do that rendering and send you back the rendered image or rendered panoramic view. Very effective. A typical rendering, and I'll talk about this later, but you can save a lot of time on the rendering quality and the rendering time. Another thing that people are using now is A360 Team. We're getting more and more questions about this product. A360 Team is essentially it's a file sharing platform for Autodesk. So if you have Autodesk softwares, which a lot of design firms do, this is a great way to share drawings, to share models, to look at each other's work, to mark up work. I'm seeing a lot of the companies that I talk to. I mean, there are some individuals that are working remotely in other sites. So as long as you have an internet connection, you can share drawings, you can share models very effectively using this. And these technologies will work on your cell phone as well. When we talk about Autodesk 360, you're talking about everything from mobile technology to desktop technology. So you can look at, say, a Revit model on your mobile phone, or an AutoCAD drawing, which most of you, I would imagine, probably done at some point. Look at an AutoCAD drawing online. So all of this does extend to the BIM platform and is a great way to share and mark up a drawing or a design and say, hey, I like this, or say I don't like this particularly here. So if a drawing is or an image is 1,000 words, then a 3D model is probably 1,000 words squared. There's a lot more that you can share with a 3D model. So you also have collaboration for Revit. Again, this is something we're getting more and more questions on. This is a very effective tool. What it essentially does is we have the capability of sharing, or actually not sharing, but we can actually work on a project from 2 different locations that are in different places. And I believe we have another webcast that's been recorded on YouTube on the Hagerman channel that talks about collaboration for Revit if you want to know more about it. But essentially, if for example, I'm in my Chicago office and I have a coworker in San Francisco, and I draw a wall or I model a piece of furniture and I save that, it immediately gets uploaded to San Francisco, where my guy in San Francisco can see that wall while that individual is working inside of Revit. So it's the same thing. If you're familiar with Revit Server, it does the same thing as Revit Server, but it's completely cloud-based, so doesn't require to be a server setup or any of the other setup issues that you have with Revit Server. So collaboration for Revit, very effective, easy to use and easy to set up. There are companies already using it, and they're using it with very large models. So if you're concerned that maybe your model might be too large, I believe you can use this with large models, depending on what your meaning of large is. It has been done. It is being done. So it's very effective, because you can see everything being done right in front of you. Then we also have BIM 360 Glue. Now, this product is actually used in the construction space because contractors, for example, they need to take many different models that are created by many different people, and all of these models are in different formats. So similar to what Navisworks would do, BIM 360 Glue takes many different models from different formats and can put them together, and you can collaborate on a project, kind of like collaboration for Revit, but it doesn't require you to have Revit. You can have other design software, and it's really just it's a collaboration platform. So it's nothing that you that you necessarily have to be inside of a certain software. It's more of a, once you gather those models, you can look at them and inspect them and see if everything fits together and if there's any coordination problems between the trades and things like that. So in the design space, designers are seeing the potential for this tool because this tool doesn't force any designer to use a particular tool. A designer can use any 3D modeling tool they want and be able to collaborate in a project. Now, this is a good thing. I mean, it can be a bad thing because sometimes, you're looking for not just a model, but you're looking for the information in the model. So if you can get good quality information in the model that you're creating, that's, I believe, more effective way of doing BIM information modeling. So BIM 360 Glue, more and more firms are using it. I think it's kind of bleeding into the design world rather than construction world where it's traditionally been. And then you have a product called Revit Server. I have another webcast that I did about Revit Server if you're interested in that. Revit Server is very similar to collaboration, but it's, instead of putting your model on the cloud, you're putting your model on your own local servers. So this is good because you're not relying on a cloud. It's not good because there's a lot of setup and there's more costs involved in the server architecture and in the software and things like that. So if you look on the Hagerman web channel, you can probably find my other presentation on Revit Server if you want to know more about this. So more and more we're getting connected through usually cloud technologies, and we can use this to our advantage in being able to work remotely and things like this. So more of the trends, I mean, there's another trend that I think is really fascinating, and this trend of reality capture. So if you've heard that term reality capture, it's another one of those Google terms that everybody wants to know what they are. So reality capture is dealing with taking the real world and somehow putting that onto your computer and be able to capture that data somehow. And I think a lot of firms, I'm not sure how many are doing it out there, but I don't hear that a lot of them are doing it. Probably not as much as I would imagine would be useful. But the laser scanning technology, it's been out for a long time. Nowadays, we can laser scan interiors of buildings and get an as-built model built very, very quickly and accurately. In my days of working in an architecture firm, I used to go out and measure things manually, and we had no access to this. I mean, at the time, I didn't even know it existed. And to be able to capture that data without having to manually measure everything is a real time saver. I mean, it's really just the most effective use of your time. I mean, the only question is going to be, what are you going to pay for the laser scanning equipment, and are you going to hire somebody? There are ways to do it. You can hire consultants to do the laser scans for you, and then they can give you a model. But with this laser scan, you can take it into a tool such as Recap, and here I'm showing Recap. This is a laser scan of an office, and you can kind of see, if I kind of go inside of it, there's a conference table in there, and oh, there you go. And so this is very accurate. Now, it is a bit hard to read, so there are ways of working around this to be able to read it and be able to create your own model from it. Now, there are no tools that I've seen so far that automatically create a model of this, so I have yet to see that. That would be awesome if we can do it, but we're just not there yet from what I've seen in the technologies. But you could take this model into Revit, or this point cloud, we should call it. And when we take this point cloud into Revit, it looks pretty much the same as it looks in Recap. So if you look at my screen right now, so I've taken that model that I have a scan of, and I just drew or modeled. I modeled some Revit walls around there. So I got a very accurate, and it's kind of funny when you start doing this because you realize how many construction construction errors there are, or whatever it may happen. Who knows? I'm sure there's probably reasons for it, but walls are built at angles, and there are walls that you might think were straight and they weren't. But essentially, I created a quick little Revit model of that room here based on the point cloud, and this can be done. There are some tricks around it. For example, like if you slice the model, you can more easily see some of the walls that are around it. And if I can show you here, I created a little section box around my point cloud, and that's a very effective way to get the data that you need, or the wall location, so that you can know where the walls are. So oops, I made that section box a little too small, but you can see here with a section box you can eliminate a lot of the unnecessary points in the point cloud, and you can see more clearly what walls you're going to be drawing or modeling. All right, so do we have a question here? Okay, so looks like we do have a question. Let me see if I can kind of pause here and see if I can answer. Does BIM 360 Glue work with AutoCAD? Absolutely, absolutely. BIM 360 Glue, what it essentially does is it takes, say, 2 models, say 10 models from all different softwares, whether it be AutoCAD, even CATIA, some of these weird file formats. It'll gather those models into one master model, and you can see that master model in the cloud. So yes, it will work with AutoCAD. So you can, if you had an AutoCAD model built and then you're working with somebody that's working in Revit or some other software package, you can still collaborate on that project in 3D. So you can check for clashes and coordination issues. Now, it doesn't have all the benefits that it would if all of the firms had Revit, for example, because if for example, all the firms had Revit, you could do clash detection, but you can also effectively get the information out, and you can see the information on your Revit screen. So there's varying levels of effectiveness, but the beauty of it is that it's very open, it's very accepting of different file formats. Okay, so that's a good question. So as I was saying, the augmented reality, there's another technology called augmented reality. Autodesk had, a couple years ago, I think, Autodesk had an augmented reality plugin. And if you look at my image here on the lower left, there's a model of a table that this person is holding. That model of that table is actually fake. It's not real. It's a table that has been modeled inside of a 3D application, and you're just viewing the actual 3D model that was created. Now, this was a plugin. It was in beta. I don't know what happened to it. I don't know if they took it off, but there are other augmented reality solutions out there. So if you have a building information model, you can, for example, ready? Now, I know it sounds a little crazy. You can actually model a piece of furniture and see exactly what that furniture looks like in a room. So if you have an existing room or an existing area or a lobby or something, and you want to see what that furniture is that you might be designing, you can actually look at it using augmented reality. So if you search for that term, there's lots and lots of packages that allow you to do this in different ways, and they usually rely on a 3D modeling program like 3D Max or Revit. Very powerful stuff. I don't see it being used enough. I mean, look at the potential. I like to design furniture, so I can see what that furniture is going to look like. I could say I design a closet. I designed a closet for my wife not too long ago. I could actually see what the closet looks like before even building it, and I can envision it inside my room or inside my bedroom. I mean, how cool is that? I don't have any examples off of this. Some of this I was trying to pull and I couldn't find it. It was kind of last minute, and I apologize for that. But it allows you to see something that's not real inside of a room, which is pretty cool stuff. So let's move on. Also, so here's some of the other capabilities that you can use Revit for presentations and construction documents. So I already talked about leveraging data. You can also leverage computational design. So this term, what is this computational design? This is like, for example, if you have an interior design of, say, a lobby, and you have a custom ceiling, and the ceiling is going to have a certain pattern in it, or you're going to build a custom wall that has maybe these fans coming out of it or something that follows a pattern. You can use this tool called Dynamo, and Dynamo works with Revit. It's a free tool. So if you have Revit, you can download Dynamo with it. And I'll show a little bit about Dynamo in a bit, but if it follows a pattern, you can program in, okay? So if you're good with numbers, or if you're kind of a mathematical person, you can program in a design of something, and you can make that design automatically shift and change according to your input. And the trick of this is that it can do very intricate designs that follow perfect patterns. So if you know that, for example, you're only using 2x4s to design something in the lobby, something you're going to do, and the 2x4s can only be 4 feet long, you can put in little rules into Dynamo, and you can tell Dynamo that if it's longer than 4 feet, then it can do this. It can make little decisions, and so you can generate this whole model of this, custom interior piece that follows these exact rules. So when you send it to your shop guy to get it built, you can rely that it's going to follow exactly the rules of construction as you see fit. Very powerful, although it's not exactly the easiest to use tools if you're not familiar with computer programming, or sort of how to input information in a numerical way, and sort of in a data-centric way, I would say. So it really, there are lots of tutorials. You can learn how to use it. There's plenty of material out there. So it might take some of you guys more time than others to pick it up and figure out how it works. But it's extremely, extremely powerful for automation. And it can be used for other things other than just designing things. It can be used for outputting information to an Excel spreadsheet in a certain way. It could be used for inputting information from an Excel spreadsheet in a certain way. You can import an Excel and then do something with that data inside of Revit, and that data from Excel will do something in your model. It's extremely powerful. And then finally, we have these extensions, which I'm going to talk about in a bit. So I'm going to jump on over to talk about rendering a little bit. So rendering, just to give you guys a little comparison, if I were to do a rendering here on the top right here, this is a rendering I did, and it took me about 2 hours to finish that. And then on the bottom right, we have a similar rendering, which was actually done in the cloud. So you'll see kind of a little bit of a quality difference between the two, because the cloud rendering was actually a higher quality render, and you can tell from the quality of the light that's bouncing off of the wall. You can tell that it's more blended into the wall. So that rendering took me about 15 minutes to do in the cloud. Now, I don't know about you, but 2 hours versus 15 minutes, that's huge, and your computer is not tied up. When you send a model to the cloud, it's not tied up while you're doing it. So even though you might spend a few credits here or there to do a cloud rendering, in the long run, it probably will save you more money than you're spending. And then finally, this is something that's kind of new that I've seen, and that is panoramic rendering. I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen, but the little the cardboard goggles that you see there, that's the Google Cardboard. All it is basically a cell phone on a piece of cardboard that's been bent up, so it looks like a virtual reality glasses. And what you could do is you could look at these panoramic renderings. If you do a cloud rendering, you can do a panoramic rendering on the cloud, and allows you to look at that panoramic rendering inside of this virtual reality glasses. And I'm going to click on this panoramic rendering so you can see a sample. Here's a sample that I did for a class one day. This is just sort of a little cafe type of design, and you can actually look at this in in these virtual reality glasses, and it will look 3D. It's pretty amazing stuff, and it really you can only understand it once you've actually gotten yourself a pair of those, or gotten yourself that Google Cardboard and actually viewed one of these in a Google Cardboard. It's pretty amazing. So what you're looking at right now is not really a cardboard model. It's really just the viewer. But this can be seen in the Google Cardboard and other virtual reality glasses, and they're so affordable, that it's not even a question of whether I would get one. It's a question of when I would get one, because there are other solutions. I mean, you don't have to use a Google Cardboard if you don't want, but this is usable by anyone with pretty much an Android phone or an iPhone. And there are other like plastic ones that look a little bit nicer if you want to show it to your client or whatever it might be. So the next thing is, when you have a BIM model, it allows you to export to other tools because you already have a lot of that data in it. You have material data. You can export to a tool like Showcase. Showcase is a product that is primarily for doing 3D visualizations, walkthroughs. And you can apply materials in Showcase, and Showcase will also read your Revit materials. So if you've already applied most of your Revit materials, you can just bring that into Showcase and tidy up the materials a little bit more, and then you can do these display walkthroughs. So there are plenty of materials you can look up if you're interested. You can look at some YouTube videos about Showcase. If you want to see what it can really do. It's an Autodesk product, so it talks very well to the Autodesk products like Inventor and AutoCAD and Revit. So shouldn't have a problem with that side, with exporting models. Then you have the classic, the 3D Max. A lot of people come from 3D Max. A lot of people that do interior design, they like to use the 3D Max for their visualizations. You can actually use Showcase with 3D Max or vice versa. So if you like 3D Max, you can go that route as well. And then there's some other great third-party applications that actually run together with Revit. And if you Google visualization in Revit, there are different rendering programs that I find that are great. I mean, they're not made by Autodesk, but they are just magnificent programs. They will make very high-quality renderings in very short times as well. And they interface very well with Revit. Because Revit has an open API, which means you can create your own add-ons inside of Revit if you have the skills to do it. So a lot of companies are leveraging that, and they're programming a lot of things that talk to Revit very well. So here's a little visual on Dynamo. So what you're looking at here is you're looking at sort of a canopy that's been generated by Dynamo, and you're looking at these little boxes that you're seeing here. These are called nodes, and what essentially those are like little data manipulators. Okay, so whenever you have any computer graphics or computer program, you have data, and what it does is you feed the data into one of these little boxes or these nodes, and then the data gets manipulated, and then it comes out of the other end, and then it goes into another little node, and then it gets manipulated a little bit more, and manipulated a little bit more, and then as it manipulates, it creates something. So you have this available to you. You can play with how you arrange these. Really, the sky's the limit, because this talks to the Revit API directly, and you can actually create your own custom nodes. So if there's a node that you need to do something, if you know a little bit of programming, like Python programming, you can create your own data manipulators and do all kinds of stuff with that data and be able to generate really interesting models from that. Again, it's really, I think it's more of a knowledge thing. If you have the knowledge and you've practiced it, you can really do a lot with it. So I think that's probably what users usually need to work on, is sort of learning more about it and how to do it and get their mind wrapped around this. This is a very powerful tool that I would recommend for interior designers to try out. Is this extension called the Roombook Extension, and if you have a subscription of Autodesk Building Design Suite and you have Revit, you can download this tool for free. It's a Roombook extension. It figures out what all of your finishes are in a room. So it counts, it knows how much wall surface of finish you have in each wall surface, and it's able to tally that, and it's able to count your total wall areas, and you can tell it what kind of finish it is, and it will tell you how much of each finish you need, so you can do a cost estimation of all your finishes. Revit, when you get Revit out of the box, Revit is sort of a more general building design tool, so it was never really designed out of the box to model some of these finishes the way that interior designer might want to do. So Roombook really solves that problem, and it allows you to give you these counts or estimates of how much finish there is, and it allows you to also give you estimates of all your furniture families, and it gives you little images. So if you look at my slide here, I have an image of a chair here, a Herman Miller chair that I put into my Revit model. I have an image of a sink, and you can have these images, and you can have these nice schedules laid out the way that an interior designer might want to see. And you can attach things like cost information and all kinds of other information to it, and it can tell you like how much furniture is in each room and things like that. So I invite you guys to look at this add-in because it talks directly to Revit, and you can manipulate the Revit model and have the data in this the data gets updated automatically. So that's the beauty of it. You don't have to do any exporting. It runs right inside of Revit. And so I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but in my mind, I see, the way I see it is, the less that you have to export something, the less data that you're losing. So the tendency is that if you can do more work in one software, you tend to save more time. So this is why I think this is an effective tool, is that you don't have to leave the Revit environment to use it. So the next thing we have here is we have also in Revit we have also design options. I talk to a lot of firms out there, and a lot of firms are like, well, we're trying to use Revit, we're trying to get it to do this, and then I would suggest, have you tried design options? And a lot of people are like, well, we haven't tried that. A lot of people just don't know what that is. So what Revit allows you to do is you can create this model, and as our clients always, our clients can never decide what they really want, or maybe we can never decide what we really want to give, or either way, we can create these different design options, and Revit understands what a design option is. And this is very effective in interior design, because every project that I've had to do where we had an interior layout or some kind of an interior design to do, there were always design options, and we always had to set up our AutoCAD layers for all the different options, and it became a layer nightmare. So Revit handles this very elegantly. It has built-in functions. It understands what a design option is. It also understands what is part of your main model. So for example, if I have the outside shell of the building, and the outside shell of the building is not going to change, Revit knows that. Revit knows that that's part of your main model, so it knows not to change that. So you can just manipulate the different design options. And if you look at my image, I modeled some quick design options here. You can see the perspectives on the left. You can see the floor plans on the right. You can get all this right out of the Revit model. It takes no extra time to do. You really just need to actually just model what you want, and that's really the key. So I mean, there's a lot of other design softwares out there, but you usually have to manually input or manually set up design options, whereas Revit, it comes out of the box, it already comes with a feature that handles this. Another thing it does is phasing. Again, in the interior design space, we might build, say we're building a very large facility, we might build the interior of the facility in 3 phases. We build different parts in 3 phases, and we have to show this on our documentation. So Revit understands phasing. So for interior designers, this is great, because you can build one part of the model in one phase, you can build another part in another phase, you can build another one in another. And so if you look at my model, this is kind of what I did. I have, phase 1, which is the existing. Phase 2 might be like the north half of the building. Phase 3 might be the south half of the building, and this allows you and your client to very clearly see what's going on, what's going to be built, and you can color code. You can color code all of these phases. Now, I didn't do it here, but you can actually color code, the different phases in different colors. And one of the cool things about this, and I don't know if you guys will be trying this anytime in the near future, but you can export this model with the phasing information in it, and you can do a quick construction simulation inside of Navisworks, and you can show sort of a animated little simulation of the area being built to kind of show the order of things for a client presentation. It's very quick because the info is already there. The information is already set up in Revit for phasing. So Navisworks would just read that information, and then you do a little bit of interpreting in it, and then you tell it how you want it to build it, and then it just does it. So it's very effective. Now, one of the last things I want to talk about is ways to implement. We're kind of running out of time. I mean, we kind of had an hour, so I think I have just the right amount of time here. Ways to implement BIM to minimize risk. A lot of this I'm talking from experience. I've been to a lot of firms. Some of them are doing great. Some of them are doing, not as effective as they probably would want, and others are doing wonderfully. So one of the things, if you really want BIM to take off, if you really want to implement Revit into your firm, I highly recommend that you guys actually hire some outside help to help you get through those first projects, to help get everybody up to speed. A lot of companies don't realize this, but when you send, for example, when you send your employees out to training for 3 days or whatever it may be, they're getting sort of the foundation, but when they come back, they're probably going to have questions of how to apply a lot of this training to their own workflow, because training can only get you so far. So that's where your consultants could come in and actually help you, maybe sit with you and help you complete the project, or set up your template, or set up your standards, or help you make this difficult Revit family that maybe you're having trouble with, or teach you how to get there. So a lot of people just they don't realize that this is actually one of the most effective ways to actually get this implemented in your office, because it ensures that it actually works. Whereas if you just get training and then you leave, and then people might just say, well, the training didn't really cover it, so I can't really use it. They'll just say, oh, or they might say, like, Revit can't do it. I have another slide here that shows a lot of excuses I've heard. But this can be very effective because it's a very objective way to look at something. For example, if a consultant tells you that employee X is doing well and employee Y needs some help, you're usually likely to believe the consultant because there's no sort of politics behind it. Whereas if you've hired someone in the firm to kind of do that stuff, there's a lot of politics that get involved, and the people don't get the help that they need because for some political reason. And this avoids a lot of politics because you're getting an objective opinion of really where you're at in the BIM world. So there's also, you can hire, for example, a programmer that will actually program a custom add-in that for your needs. Now, with smaller firms, it might be a little more difficult to do this because of the costs. But in bigger firms, if you have a lot of employees and all of these employees are spending hours, setting up sheets or something in Revit, you can have a programmer create a custom plugin for your company that will do this in Revit. Very, very effective. But this requires that you really understand what the problem is in your firm, what specifically the problem is, because if you don't quite understand the problem, then there's going to be time that's going to have to be spent, understanding really what you need the programmer to do, because the programmer has to know specifically what you need the Revit model to do. Once the programmer knows that, then the sky's the limit, really. You can manipulate the data in virtually any way. Nowadays, you can also rent the software. So if you have a desktop license, we can rent the software for, say, a quarter. So if you have a really big project that's coming up and you think you're going to put in a couple extra employees on the project then you can rent the software for those extra employees, and then later on, if you decide to rent for a longer term, you can minimize the risk that way. So if you don't have that project later and you have to downsize later, then you can, the rent is going to expire, and then you won't have spent as much money as if you had purchased the software or as if you had rented it for a very long period. So it's very effective as far as like minimizing or making your cash flow better inside of a firm. You can also, you need to change your way of budgeting. If you're going to implement Revit or BIM, you need to change the way you budget. And you really need to have, you need to work with somebody that understands the tool well enough, like a BIM manager, to help you work out, what the budget is going to be, because BIM projects, they're more time consuming in the early stages, and because you're actually front loading, they're very front loaded. You're putting a lot more data in the beginning, and if that data is put in a proper way, in a good way, you can get all that data out at the end and you won't lose time. And this has happened a lot. People have started to do the Revit projects and they're like, whoa, it's taking way too long, and then they get scared and they jump ship. They jump ship back to AutoCAD, and that's actually not effective, because when you jump back to AutoCAD, you lose a ton of data. You lose a ton of data that you had put in, and now you have to manually draw that data in, and it takes even longer, so you're actually wasting more money by jumping ship than if you had stayed in it and just hired somebody to help you, like a consultant. So I've seen everything happen, so definitely take a look at that. Also, budget time in the project for learning curve. You can't expect to send out employees for a 3-day class and expect them to come back and be as good at Revit as they are with AutoCAD. It's just not realistic. So you need to pad that into your project budget, and make sure you pad some costs in of how much extra time it's going to take your employees to get up to speed and create their template and get the info they need. Again, a consultant can help you pad this a little bit less. So it costs you less than what it would if you had somebody that is kind of new to Revit. Pick a small, simple pilot project. I've seen companies jump around and be like, well, I don't think we want this project. I don't think we want this one. They're getting way too picky with their pilot projects, and they end up never implementing the tool. Pick a small project. Even if Revit is not required, just pick a small, simple project. That will help you get rid of a lot of the, redundant problems, a lot of the kind of preliminary issues. It will help you clear a lot of issues that you will have on a larger scale project. So pick a small project. Understand that you're gonna go a little over budget on that project, because there's a learning curve, okay? And there's ways to minimize that learning curve, but it will cost you more because people are still learning. They may not admit it to you, but they are still learning how to use the tool. And so here, and the last thing is, take advantage of the level of detail in the Revit model. If you have very large models that you're working on, you probably want to use placeholders in the beginning of the project for everything. Don't worry too much about modeling everything perfectly. Just have the overall design and placeholders, and that should save you a lot of hassle, because the projects tend to change a lot. They change towards design development, and if you have placeholders, then you didn't spend as much time as you would have if you had modeled everything manually, or if you had tried to even download from the internet. A lot of people think that, like, well, I can find a Revit model, I can download it, so it shouldn't take me any time to put this into my Revit model. That's just an incorrect assumption. I've had many times when I've spent way more time looking for a Revit model online than I have spent actually just modeling a simple family and putting it in there, as crazy as it may sound, because we spend a lot of time Googling things and looking for things when we could take advantage of that work and just model it right in there very quickly. So one of the questions I'm getting is, do you have a webinar that demonstrates how to use Showcase? There are a lot of videos and tutorials on how to use Showcase, okay? You just need to sit down and take the time to do it. I didn't plan on showing this, but there is a lot of material out there. Once you install Showcase, if you go to the help section, there's more than enough, probably more than most people would be able to handle as far as material. So take a look at that, get started with that. But I don't think we have a webinar ourselves that show how to use it. No. So moving on in my presentation. Again, don't model everything. Focus on the information you need. So if you just need to show a couch in plan, don't bother modeling it until maybe when you need a rendering. Kind of try not to front load the project as much. You know what I mean? Content template creation. There's already plenty of content out there. A lot of it can be downloaded from online sources like Autodesk Seek or Revit City. Usually go and look at the manufacturer and call the manufacturer if you need something, because a lot of times the manufacturer will make stuff for you. Like, for example, we did some designs and we used the Steelcase stuff, and we called Steelcase and they actually helped us make the content because we spec'd them. They were very helpful with us, and they got us the Revit content we needed. So there's still a lot of stuff out there. There are also companies that specialize in making content, so you can hire them just to make the content. It's not as expensive as you may think. They can make all the families that you usually use on a day-to-day basis. And there's also, now there's images in Revit schedules, so you can now put, when you create a Revit schedule, you can put an image of the furniture, so you don't have to model something in. If you have a quick JPEG or some kind of an image, just put that into your schedule. And if you need to look at it later, if you need to model it later, you can always refer back to the image, and it'll help you kind of figure out what it needs to look like, and so on. So there's a lot that is developed. Talk a little bit about how to break down the projects. These are a couple of ways of how to do it. You can break them down by different parts of the building, or you can break them down by floors if you have a high-rise. A lot of this you can get a lot of help if you hire a consultant to help you. The consultant will usually help you set up the Revit project depending on the way the project is. So every project is different and every company is different. The API, I didn't talk about this enough, but you can customize Revit with the API, and this is extremely powerful. Anything that you want to automate in the software, you can pretty much automate it using the API. So a lot of people just don't have the time to learn how to program. It does take a long time to learn, so I suggest that either you hire somebody to help you to program something for you, or you look on the Autodesk App Store for an add-in that does what you need. And then finally, reason why people don't move, reasons why they do move. We're kind of running out of time, but the excuse I hear a lot about is Revit just doesn't do what we need. I hear that excuse a lot. Usually people want to blame the software, because if they blame themselves, they can be in danger of either losing their job or just making themselves look bad, so they'll blame the software. Revit's been around for quite a few years now. A lot of the limitations that an interior designer would have run to, an architect has already run to, and that limitation has already been fixed, or there is a workaround for it. So I don't think software is really the issue now. I think the issue is more about how to implement it effectively so you can get your return on your investment. And the way to do that is to get people around you that really know the software well, and really know that they know the software well, because there's a lot of people out there that are claiming that they know the software when they really don't know as much, and unfortunately that's just the nature of the beast. There's no degree or anything that can tell you that you really know your stuff, so you really have to vet your people and see who are the best people in there to help you spearhead these Revit projects. I think sometimes there's just not enough company investment. And this is the stuff that companies, a lot of times they learn it when it's too late. They've invested a few $1,000s on implementing, and then they need to invest a couple more $1,000 on maybe having some on-site help or something, and they skimp out on it. and then what ends up happening is they actually lose more money because they ended up not taking full advantage of the stuff that they already had in place, and they end up just kind of going back to their old ways. So sometimes it just takes a little bit more company investment. You know, it's not just training. It really is not. You have to get someone out there with your people and make sure that it is being actually used properly. Sometimes your project stakeholders aren't using BIM. And I mean, nowadays, I think a lot of people already know what it is, but a lot of people, they think they don't want it because they think it's going to cost them more. And again, that's really your prerogative of how you want to sell yourself. But at the end of the day, you are providing a quality service if you're providing some kind of a BIM process. So you are doing more quality control in that respect. So it can only benefit your client. And a lot of these issues, I mean, you won't see these cost savings until you get to the construction phase, and there are less RFIs, and you're actually saving money on the construction. You won't see these until way later on, a year down or whatever time it may be. So why is this process important to look at? Higher quality control. It teaches you to look at your process in a different way. Everybody's just so used to looking at things like in 2D drawings. Like I do the elevations, you do the plans, he does the perspectives, and that's just not, you know, you're working in little silos. You know, you're not working together as much as you probably could. So if you look at the process in a different way, like you're working on a design together, you're designing a space together, and you're collaborating. One person may be designing the furniture, another person's maybe working on the finishes, or maybe one person's working on one room, the other one. I mean, it's just a different way of thinking. It will force the creative juices more freely when you're working on a different process. There's something that happens in your brain when you work in a different way. It's kind of hard to explain, but there's actually books that have been written about this. It positions your company as a leader. I mean, if you're showing that you're competent in BIM, you've done a BIM project, it can lead the way to new projects. This is also something that companies just don't see. They see all the costs, and they don't really see, like, wait a minute, this could actually get us more projects. And again, this is hard to prove because it's hard to even know, how are you going to know whether that project really came from the fact that you had BIM? You know, you really have to ask people and figure that out for yourself. Provide owner with more value. Again, they may not even realize this. A lot of times they don't realize. They don't even know what they're asking for. And then also better decision making, because you're sharing. If you share a model, I mean, even though you may be hesitant to share a model, I believe in actually sharing a model, because the owner will see better what you're doing, and the owner will give you more effective feedback. A lot of owners cannot read floor plans. They cannot visualize. They haven't been working in floor plans for years. They don't draw floor plans, so they don't know what they're looking at. So if you give them a model, you know, it could even be just a little shared model from A360 or something, and they can look through it. It's way more effective than showing them a floor plan. So I think I got through most of it. Are there any additional questions? I don't think there are, but if you do have any questions, write them on the chat box, or let me know if you have a question, and I will be happy to maybe email you later or something. I thank you very much for your time. I hope you got something out of this presentation. There are different firms in different places, so it's kind of hard to do a one-size-fits-all because everybody has different needs. But if there's anything else that maybe I can assist you with in the long run, I do help companies implement Revit. So if you're looking for something like that, do come talk to us about it, and we'll see what we can do to help you. So I'm seeing a few questions. I'm not sure if they've been answered or not. Does BIM 360 Glue work with AutoCAD as well? Yes. Do you have a webinar? Okay, I already answered that one. Do you have a webinar that demonstrates design options within BIM? Well, design options are actually a Revit feature. I think Daniel probably answered that. And then,
yeah, correct.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. Have most of these questions been answered? Because I'm kind of looking through this thing, and it's
the first two have been answered. The last 3 or 4 have not.
Okay, great. Let's see here. Where can we find those types of consultants? Well, we are one of those. A lot of people come for training. They look at our online manuals. A lot of people just don't talk to us person to person. I don't think enough of them do. But we do those types of consulting. You know, when companies come to me, I visit their office whenever I can. If they'll let me in, I'll visit them and try to help them do this stuff. It really takes a dialogue. You know, you can't just send somebody an email and try to figure out what your firm needs. It's nice to be able to see people's faces and see what they're struggling with. We do provide those kinds of services if that's what you're interested in. So just get with me if you want to know this. I'll put my email here is robertlevy@hagerman.com. I'll put that in the chat box. If you're interested, just shoot me an email and I'll get you connected with who you need to get connected with. So the big problem with Revit is the amount of details we put in our documents, not cost effective to model them, and to do them in 2D is more efficient. I mean, it really depends on who you ask. I mean, if your staff is better at using AutoCAD, of course AutoCAD is going to be more efficient, of course. But if your staff has enough training and you understand and have used Revit enough, you can make it work to use Revit for your documentation. I mean, it depends a lot on who's doing this stuff. How are you doing it? What is the process that you have in place? What kind of documents are you working on? What are the needs of the project? Also, architects usually hate when interior model ends up being bigger than the architectural. I could kind of relate to this. There are ways around this. If you take advantage of the detail levels of the models, you really need to educate the people you're working with. Sometimes they're not even aware of some of the stuff that you know. You know, you need to talk to them and say, hey, we're going to do this low detail version. You can activate the high detail. You can unload some of these work sets. There's all kinds of things that can be done. You know, if they're complaining about a Revit model, maybe they're just not seeing the big picture. Maybe they're just not seeing all the benefits that are coming from this. I mean, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of education that I think could be had. So talk to those people and see what the problems are. See if there's not a way you can help them solve it. At the end of the day, you are a team. You're working together. So the more effectively you can work together, the better your project is going to turn out at the end. It's going to benefit everybody. You know, so if you start working in little silos and, you know, well, we're doing a model here, we have no idea what they're doing, you know, maybe it's a good idea to start reaching out to them and calling them and seeing what they can handle, seeing where the project is going and seeing what the sizes are and how to manage the size of the model. There's lots of ways. I've worked with companies that have done very, very large models, and I could not even believe that these large models were even possible until I've seen them. So it really is not a software limitation anymore. I think it's more of how you set it up and how to get your process in place so that you can handle these kinds of data and detailing and how to handle the details. And, you know, yeah, a lot of this stuff is not cost effective to model. You know, you really have to ask yourself, why am I modeling this? Do I need a rendering of it? Do I need an elevation of it? What do I need out of it? If I'm going to need an elevation, then you probably need to model it a little bit. If you're going to need a rendering of it, maybe you want to model it a little bit differently. If you just need it for documentation, then you can just do a plan version of it. That's it. So there's ways around it, okay? And if you get with us, I mean, maybe we can help you guys out with that stuff. I think that's it.
Yeah, it looks good. I don't see any more questions on here.
So again, thanks very much for your time, and I hope you guys have benefited from this. If at least you can go out and see some of the things that I've been talking about, look at those software packages, see how they work, what they do, and see how that fits into your process. It might fit in quite well.
Okay, thanks, Robert. This does conclude our broadcast. If you have additional questions, you can simply reply to that confirmation email. If not, email Robert, and we can get those to him. Once again, if you could fill out that survey, we would appreciate it. And thanks for attending today's webcast. Have a great day.